All right, we're late. About 24 hours late.
Well, I had to fly back. I had to fly back from the home of Hank Williams from Montgomery, Alabama. It's so funny because it's in a couple of days, literally, Eric. It's going, and there was no signs of this in Montgomery. By the way, welcome everyone who was at the meetup. It was fantastic. Eric and I had a great time. I was kind of stunned by the overwhelming support of our insane fans. My favorite is this guy Larry, who drove in his truck just from Oklahoma right to the event. Just went out for cigarettes and kept going. I mean, dude, there was some people who were dedicated to this channel, and I got to tip my hat to them. I had no idea how strong the support was.
Oh yeah, we had Poughkeepsie, New York came.
Dude, it was just ridiculous.
Ridiculous
geography these people went on to get to the event. And as I said at the event, we're going to need a bigger boat, to quote Roy Scheider in Jaws, because we packed them into this meetup room, which was a legitimate meeting room in a hotel. But it was tight. It was pretty tight.
Yeah, we may be doing this again. The turnout.
Well, we're going to need a bigger room. We're going to need a bigger boat, Hunley.
Yeah, I think so, for sure.
The VIP room, that was a little more elbow room because there was only 25 people. But the other event was squished, and not that it mattered. And we had this guy Greg Bedell from the radio station in Montgomery as kind of the host. Hosting us. He did an incredible job, as did Rosie Brock, his assistant, who brought the food in and everything from the restaurants in the area. It was amazing because I couldn't do this. Eric couldn't do this. We're too far away and we didn't have boots on the ground, and these people stepped up, and it was quite impressive. And I'll be doing Greg Bedell's show tomorrow at 3:30. 2:30 my time, I think it is. No, 1:30 Pacific Coast time, and whatever time that is in Central time, which is a weird thing in Central time, because I went to Atlanta, and when you cross the Georgia state line,
instantly,
it's really freaky because you go, what? All of a sudden you lose an hour, and it's really close, is all I'm saying. So it's you got to pay attention to the time zone right there in Alabama, that area of Alabama.
For sure.
But good to get out, meet the people, press the flesh. A lot of questions, a lot of suggestions to get us out of the mess that we're in now. And I hope we could do it again to get some ideas as to how to deal with the situation that we're in nationally.
And if anybody wants to watch the actual meetup show on structure.locals.com, we did record it. We actually live streamed it on Locals, and it's free to follow. You can watch it for free on Locals. Just become a member there. No money involved, and you can watch the show that we did. And we went all over the place. I mean, we talked about a lot of different subjects. We're not going to put up on YouTube.
Right. No, it was a cute. Greg was asking people what their questions were, and it came from the audience. So it's kind of like some bizarre Jerry Springer show in a weird way. Or what was the other one? Donahue. It was more like Donahue. He was pretty good. I liked it. Right? Remember Donahue? He'd go into the audience. I think Budell was channeling Donahue. Phil Donahue.
I think so. Any of those. But okay. But while we were there, because this is the 100th birthday coming up this month of Hank Williams, we're in Montgomery. We're pushing the second half of the Spies to next Tuesday, and tucking in this Montgomery gap here with Hank Williams.
Because September 17th, 1923 is when he was born, Hank, and I hope they've got something coming up in Montgomery, because the whole town, besides being a civil rights center, the second biggest thing, or the first biggest thing, depending on how you look on it, is Hank Williams. Who is the spiritual child of Montgomery. He wasn't born in Montgomery, but he, spent the better part of his childhood and years and youth in Montgomery, Alabama. So there's statues, there's the museum with the Cadillac, there is the Oakwood Cemetery that I went to. to see the incredible grave of Hank Williams. We'll show that at the end of the show. It's just really emotional about Hank Williams because the everything in music, in my opinion, this is all my opinion, by the way. Everything in music starts with Hank Williams. You could talk to Keith Richards about Honky Tonk Woman as a homage to the honky tonk music of Hank Williams. Hank Williams is the birth of rock and roll. You could talk about Bob, Haley and the Comets taking Rock Around the Clock and all his different songs. But Rock Around the Clock in 1954, if you look at it, is really what we're going to get into. You'll see that it's really Move It On Over in 1947, which is the first rock and roll song. So Hank Williams is not only about country music. Hank Williams is the birth of rock and roll, people. And that's why he's important. Not that he's some hillbilly. They called him the hillbilly Shakespeare, which is absolutely true. The songs that Hank wrote are immortal. They will live forever. He is the number one inspiration of Bob Dylan, as per Bob Dylan, number one inspiration to the Rolling Stones, number one inspiration to a lot of people. And people don't realize that because Hank died young. He died at the age of 29 and from drugs and alcohol, like many other people, 2 years ahead of the 27-year-old crowd. Who had better drugs, I guess, than Hank was able to put together in 1952 when he passed away. But, just to go backwards in time, I mean, Hank's family in central Alabama, the father was in World War I, and he got some sort of a shell shock or hit his head. So it's highly disputable as to what happened to him. But he ends up coming back, and he starts getting facial paralysis. He has a brain aneurysm, so he's put into a VA hospital for 8 years running, Eric. Not 8 uninterrupted years in the middle of Hank's life. So Hank just has his mother Lily, but his father Lon, who went to World War I don't know what that is, but
that's baby Hank.
Okay. Well, this part of the story is not born yet. But getting back to the father, the father of Hank's grandfather, Williams, who was the father's father, fought in the Civil War. And the oddity about Hank's grandfather is he fought on both sides in the Civil War. He was obviously a Confederate because Jefferson Davis comes out of Montgomery, Alabama. So it's kind of the cradle of the Confederacy, Montgomery. That's why it's so important in terms of Civil War buffs. But also that Hank Williams' grandfather was captured by the Union Army and then forced to fight on the side of the Union Army, as opposed to going to a prison or executed. So he fought technically, I don't know how much his heart was in it on the Union side, but he technically fought on both sides in the Civil War, which is kind of interesting semantically and philosophically for Hank Williams, who will be his grandson a little bit later on, being on both sides of music and both sides of art and both sides of politics and both sides of everything. But the mother, which I was getting to, Lily, is this huge 250-pound woman who takes on the responsibility of raising this family. And the family moves around, and she ends up running a boarding house, quote unquote, boarding house. There's Lily there. Is that Hank on the bottom?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Well, she has a daughter, and she has Hank, and this is in Greenville, Alabama, 1934, I believe. This photo. They moved to Georgiana, Alabama, which is not that far away. This is all central. People in Alabama know where these places are. I don't know. I was just down there driving to all of them the other day, researching this thing and trying to see where the roots of Hank come from and go to, because my own interest in Hank Williams is separate from the show. One of the reasons I wanted to have the meetup in Montgomery was because of Hank Williams. And Hank Williams, to me, represents the both kinds of music that we have in this country, both country and Western. That's an old music joke, but Hunley's going to think about it on the way home. But I've
seen which was the Blues Brothers, I believe it was.
Yeah, it's an old joke. Anyway, so in Georgiana, Alabama, his mother has another boarding house, and these boarding houses have a separate illicit practice in the back, Eric. I don't have to go into what that practice could be, but his mother had to make money. So she ran a boarding house / bordello in a couple of these towns, and it burns to the ground. And she has no money. They lose all the possessions. Everything's gone. They own nothing. And a wealthy businessman, that's her and Hank. That's her on the right, obviously. And a wealthy businessman gives them the use of one of his expensive homes that he has in the town, and they live fairly large because the guy gives them a house, this wealthy dude, and they kind of live pretty good, based on that. But I mean, they merely have the house. They don't really have money. She's selling strawberries and working as a night nurse and everything else. And Hank himself, yeah, that's one of, that might be the one in Georgiana. There's a couple of houses around. Some of them have been rebuilt. I can't really read where that one is, but
I'd have to look. Hold on.
Yeah, where is that? Does it say that?
Georgiana.
Georgiana, right? Okay, yeah. So that's the one in Georgiana. So Hank hangs out downtown as a little boy, shining shoes, and he's making money. A couple of nickels here and there, giving it all to his mother, and begins to keep some of the money for himself. She takes every cent. But he begins to buy some firecrackers, and eventually, from a relative, gets a guitar. She sends him to like gospel singing school, not really a school, but gospel singing training. And she takes him to church where she plays the organ, despite the illicit nature of her other business. She does play the organ in church, and he sits there with her and learns music at the side of his mom. Now, he also goes downtown where he meets an old black man named Rufus Payne, a.k.a. T-Tot. T-Tot is short for teetotaler. And I assume that Rufus Payne did not drink, hence the name T-Tot. And this was a guy, I think he died at the age of 53 or something, but he's the guy who taught Hank Williams the blues. There's a statue of T-Tot. I don't know how accurate that is, but it's kind of what he looked like back in the day. So he was an obscure guy, never made it. But he's today's hero of the blues, by the way, in case anybody's wondering. There's a plaque to him down in Alabama. They have a lot of these around Alabama on the sides of the road, and that's one for Rufus Payne. And he takes, I don't want to say takes him under his wing, but he teaches, that's the grave of T-Tot. He takes Hank Williams under his wing and teaches him at least the blues part of music, how to, there's Hank. And Hank writes a song about that age right there, a little bit younger. He writes a song called WPA Blues. And sings that song, and he plays it on a radio station, and he wins a contest, and he wins like $15, and he becomes like the singing kid, and he gets airtime on this radio channel in Montgomery, where he begins to form a career. Now the mother takes on his career like a Hollywood stage mom, and she begins to promote him and put him on stage and collect money and do all these different things. The mother really takes over his career and begins to become his manager, the gatekeeper, the gig booker, and everything else related to music. And it's all from the mom, because she can tell that Hank's got a gift. And that's why she gets involved in this. And she's correct. She's absolutely correct. In fact, she will be in the middle of bar fights with Hank Williams. She will be there when bottles are being thrown and everything's going crazy. And he once said, I would want my mother had my back in many bar fights with a broken bottle in her hand. And that's the only one I'd ever want in back of me, was my own mom watching my back. I mean, this is the type of brawler. No, I'm serious. This is the type of brawler Lily Williams was. This was a madam, obviously. She ran a bordello, so she had to be a tough broad. But she was also in bar fights with her own son, which I find to be probably unique in country or any kind of music. where you're looking for your mother with a broken bottle in back of you to back you up in a bar fight. So anyway, in 1934, the house burns down, and they're driving a year later back into Montgomery, and he's drunk and back. He's already a teenage drunk. He starts drinking at the age of 11, by the way, which is not unusual for Alabama, but that's what happens with him. He's got some, I want to say, Cherokee or Indian blood in him, which exacerbates the alcoholism, as Native Americans have a very high incidence of alcoholism genetically. But anyway, so his mother is driving the car, and he's cacked out in the back, and it's the middle of the night, and she says, "Wake up, I can see the Montgomery airport from here. I can see the light." And from that, "I can see the light," he begins to write "I Saw the Light," which becomes a gospel hit, one of the most famous songs he ever wrote, where he weaves into it the Gospels of Matthew and John and the book of Revelation. And the people who are Christians in our audience know what I'm talking about. The song is so moving that it doesn't start out as a hit when it hits the charts. But as the years go on, "I Saw the Light" becomes the #1 Hank Williams song for a lot of people of the Christian faith, and not even remembered as Hank Williams. It's kind of like a song that you think, when you hear it, was written centuries or hundreds of years ago, because it's so perfect that you can't believe a human being wrote it, that it must come out of the Bible. And it's kind of like "The Weight" by Robbie Robertson. It's one of those songs that when you read and hear it, you believe it's 200 years old, but it's not. It's only 10 or 20 or 30 years old, and it was written by a mortal. And the mortal in this case was Hank Williams. And Hank, to the essence of "I Saw the Light" was that it's kind of the prayer of a backslider hoping for redemption, which is kind of his story. If you had to sum up the Hank Williams story, it's the prayer of a backslider hoping and praying for redemption. And whether it comes to Hank or not, it is what it is. It doesn't end well for Hank. But Hank, writes this song, it gets released, and in 1944, he marries a woman he meets in a drugstore named Audrey Shepard, who has she's just still married, and she has a daughter named Lucretia. I don't think she gets divorced in time for his marriage. I think she's still married when she marries Hank Williams in 1944, on December 15th. And Audrey Shepard begins to take over Hank's life, and gets into muscle feuds with the mother who is running Hank's life. Audrey Shepard is a wannabe Tammy Wynette, and she's terrible, though. She's Tammy well not. And there's Audrey Shepard on the left. There's Audrey Shepard in the middle there with Hank. Hank knew that she couldn't sing, and he had many knockdown, drag-out fights with her, because not only did she want to manage Hank, which she did, she also puts herself in the middle of the band. And the band doesn't like it. Hank doesn't like it. Nobody likes it. In fact, years later, she'll do a cover with a remake of "I Saw the Light" with him. And he writes a letter to Fred Rose to not release the recording because he can't stand her voice. "I Saw the Light" is recorded on April 21st, 1947, about 3 years after their marriage. And it's released in September 48. So just to get a time frame of what we're talking about, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48. But in 1947, he releases and records "Move It On Over," like I said. And "Move It On Over" is a huge hit for Hank Williams and puts him on the map. Like I said, it's completely a song that is ripped by Bill Haley and the Comets. And you can see an interview, if you want, with Hank Williams Jr. talking about it. Many ethnomusicologists have put the two songs side by side. And the only reason that matters is because historians have historically believed that "Rock Around the Clock" in 1954 is considered the first rock and roll song, Eric. And it's not really true. It's "Move It On Over." And Haley ripped "Move It On Over" and turned it into "Rock Around the Clock" and sped it up a tiny bit.
And this is him with Lucretia.
Right, who's not his daughter. Like I said, it's the daughter from the first marriage, but he raises Lucretia as his own. Later in 1949, he comes up with a cover of an old song from 1922, which was kind of obscure because it was never a hit, called Lovesick Blues. Lovesick Blues goes to #1 on the Billboard charts for 4 months in 1949, puts him on the map. And also in June of 1949, he debuts, because of Lovesick Blues, I think, really. He debuts at the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville. And he becomes a star, not a star, the star of the Grand Ole Opry, Eric. His first performance there in 1949, he comes back out for 6 consecutive encores. Just think about that. Your first time there, he had been in the Louisiana Hayride, which is a spinoff, or not a spinoff, but a smaller version of the Grand Ole Opry out of Shreveport, the Louisiana Hayride, similar to the Grand Ole Opry. He will go back and forth between the two. He hooks up with Rose Acuff, and his hero is Roy Acuff, and Acuff has a music publishing company with Fred Rose out of Nashville. It's the #1 music publishing company in country music, and that's Rose Acuff. Rose is a recovering alcoholic who has been clean a long time, plays piano, he's kind of artistic, and he is partners with the legendary Roy Acuff. And Rose Acuff Music signs him, and they're the ones who put out Hank's music. And Rose becomes like a father figure for him. He's an older man and tries to keep Hank sober to no avail, but off and on throughout his career, it's Rose that is there for him like a father figure. And it works, and then it doesn't work, and he gets kicked out of the Grand Ole Opry. But the point of the matter is, in 1950, Hank is making the equivalent of today about $15,000 a show, Eric. And yeah, that's in 1950. So every show he's doing, they buy a house in Nashville, they get multiple Cadillacs. They are living so large that Hank is mailing money to anyone who writes him a sob story letter. I don't know what this
Roy
is here.
Acuff.
Oh yeah, that's Roy. Yeah, from obviously the Grand Ole Opry, but Acuff is a millionaire publisher by himself with Fred Rose. I mean, Acuff is probably the guy running the Grand Ole Opry, as people know who Roy Acuff is. And two of the heroes of Hank Williams are Roy Acuff and Ernest Tubb, the Texas troubadour, for people who know country really well. But the reality of it is, 1950 is 50 to 52, 50 to 51 is really the apex of Hank's career. Now you're in a post-World War II environment. So he goes on a tour of Europe for the GIs. They send him to Berlin, actually, in 1950, and they write him a letter in Russian. And the letter in Russian in Berlin says, "Please return if found," in case he got drunk and stumbled into the Russian zone. This is true. They write him a letter in Russian, and Hank says, he goes, "I think we're going to win the Cold War. These people can't even spell." And about the letter that, "Please return Hank Williams if found," that kind of a letter. But he begins to record under a pseudonym called Luke the Drifter. In 1950, Luke the Drifter becomes a storytelling, non-singing version of Hank Williams. It has a backup band, but they're more morality-based stories that Hank tells as Luke the Drifter. Christian-themed revelation stories, morality-themed recitations, if you want to call it that. But they don't want to put them on the jukebox. They're not ballads at all. They're not even songs. It's him talking. Yeah, no, you got to check it out. I mean, I'll put them up on Locals. I'll put a bunch of them up after the show and some other obscure videos of Hank. But Luke the Drifter becomes this separate career move of Hank Williams, where how can I explain this? They become like there's an organ, there's steel guitar, there's bass fiddle, and he's basically talking these morality plays of people who've gone astray. Let me just put it that way. And they don't want this on the jukebox because if somebody pushes B5 thinking they're going to get Your Cheating Heart or something like that, they're going to end up with this morality play. So they convince him to use a pseudonym of Luke the Drifter. That's how it happens. And that comes from Fred Rose. And Fred Rose is correct. I mean, Luke the Drifter albums didn't really sell. They were not commercial things. It was just something that Hank wanted to do because he had the muscle to do it, you know. And also, he was a real spiritual cat who believed in this kind of stuff. So 1951 is kind of the peak of his career, and he goes on a tour with Bob Hope, of all people. I mean, a multiple, you know, not just Bob Hope, but there's actors and performers and different people. And he ends up in CBS in New York on the Perry Como show, where he sings "Hey Good Looking," and that just blows him out the door. The entire country hears him singing "Hey Good Looking," and on national TV, Eric, and that was really, really huge. In fact, a little bit later, "Cold Cold Heart" is covered by Tony Bennett, and it goes #1 in the country, Eric. So people are beginning to cover Hank's songs and make hits out of them. You know what I mean? As things would have it. But the marriage with Audrey begins to become, you know, one of these knockdown, drag out, drunken fights. She's cheating on him. He's cheating on her. She's a drunk. He's a drunk. She's a brawler. He's a brawler. There's fights. There's furniture being smashed in this house. They look so. There's Bocephus. There's little Hank Williams Jr. on his lap, and then the other daughter from her previous marriage. But that's Hank Jr. Sitting on Hank's lap, aka Bocephus. But Audrey Williams is a hellcat, and she loves to party and spend his money like it's going out of style. And I mean out of style. She just went hog wild. They open up a store, clothing store, a Western wear clothing store in Nashville, almost as a side issue. But she wants to be in that band in the worst way, and they don't want her in there. And then I think it was like in December 46, he releases Honky Tonkin'. 47, February 47 releases Honky Tonkin'. Now keep in mind, this is a post-World War II musical change where honky tonks begin to spring up. And honky tonks are places you can fight, drink, dance, and do all kinds of stuff. So the musicians talk about how they needed to be electrified and have sound, Eric, because sound had to drown out the yelling and fighting and bashing and moving around in these. No, that's what everyone says, you know. And you take it for granted now that these places are electrified, but they weren't then. And in post-World War II, that's when these clubs started to go electric, and that's where honky-tonk music came from. And the honky-tonk sound, which you know, Dwight Yoakam will later bring back out of Bakersfield and revive it later in the 80s. The honky-tonk sound is definitively a post-World War II shit-kicking type of blues, swing, and rock, if I can put three types of music together, which I think it is. And it's a party music. It's a celebration music. It's a music of, you know, we won World War II. Let's get drunk and dance. And these are the people who are doing it. And they're not 40 years old, but they've come back from World War II and they're 25, 28, 29, Eric. I mean, that's the age group. If you think about it, people who survive and they go over to World War II, you're 18, 19, 20, 22. You come back after 4 years, you're 26 or 25 or 24, 29, whatever, 30. And you just beat the Nazis. It's time to party, you know. So, and they were partying, and so was Hank, you know, and so was everybody else around him. And this music sweeps the country. It goes from California to the South. It's not just music that's sent to the South. It goes across the Midwest. It goes up to Cleveland. It goes all the way to the Northwest, and everybody's, you know, doing honky tonk. It grows out of some other forms of music, but nevertheless, radio really kicks it in, and then television kicks it in. When I was describing him being on Perry Como, everyone was watching it. The people in New York didn't know what the hell it was, but it was the same when Elvis went on Ed Sullivan, Eric. Nobody knew what the hell was going on. It was very similar, but everyone below the Mason-Dixon line, of course, knew who Elvis was out of Tupelo, Mississippi, but nobody in the North knew. And that was, of course, that ended when he went on Ed Sullivan, which is similar to what Hank did with Perry Como.
Did they cross paths?
Elvis said he wouldn't have existed if it wasn't for Hank Williams.
Okay, I didn't know if they had crossed paths or did anything together. Now, where does rockabilly fall into that mix?
Rockabilly is a type of music that is honky tonk music. I mean, Dwight Yoakam is rockabilly, and rockabilly is rockabilly. If you think about the Stray Cats and you think about rockabilly, it's more rock than Billy, if that makes any sense. You know, it's more rock than Billy, and honky tonk is more country than rock, if that makes any sense, in my opinion. Okay, so and May 12th, 1951, I think it is, Hank Williams checks into North Louisiana State Sanitarium in Shreveport for alcoholism. It's his first time, I think, the first recorded time that he checks into a clinic for alcoholism. They don't have much treatment back then. He only stays 3 days, Eric, and then checks himself out against doctor's orders. But he has, as a child, a deformity that some people may have heard of called spina bifida. And he has a curved spine. And his spine is a birth defect, and it gives him an immense amount of pain in his back. So he's been drinking and doing this type of stuff since he was younger because of the incredible pain that was in. The doctors at the time said it's going to pass. It never passed. He had it his entire life. And in November 1951, he's going squirrel hunting with one of the drifting cowboys, one of the members of his band, and he falls down and really injures his back and has to have back surgery, which he does, I think, in Nashville at Vanderbilt. He has back surgery, and he leaves that against doctor's regulations and discharges himself once again. But in 1951, after this back surgery and after checking himself into rehab, his career begins to go downhill until he gets briefly sober and makes a comeback. But in 1952, he has an affair with a woman named Bobby Jett. Now, Bobby Jett was a dancer. I don't know if that's her real name, but it may have been a stage name. Bobby Jett was a dancer that he picked up, and there she is, with that highlighted little segment there. If you can leave that up, that's Bobby Jett. He will impregnate Bobby Jett, and then in May 29th, 1952, Audrey will divorce him. There was 2 attempts at divorce. Once she tries to divorce him, changes her mind, and then divorces him, I think finally May 29, 1952. Has this affair with Bobby Jett. And he impregnates Bobby Jett. And 5 days after his death, which we'll get into in a little while, Jett Williams is born. Now, Jett Williams becomes a singer herself, and she's the product of Bobby Jett and Hank Williams hooking up. It's just a crazy family tree here, so try to bear with me. If I get this right, I'll be shocked. There's so many loose branches on this tree. In 1952, in June, Audrey files for divorce. And in October of 52, he hooks up with Farron Young's girlfriend. Farron Young was a big country star. Farron Young's girlfriend is Billie Jean Jones, who was 19 years of age. Stunning girl. She becomes the next Mrs. Hank Williams. This is Bobby Jean Jones, who was the girlfriend of Farron Young, and he knew her through Farron Young. So they get married, and they get married in live performance. He sells out auditoriums for the actual wedding is done at a live show. This is the marriage of Hank and Billie Jean, Farron Young's former girlfriend. She will later go back to Farron Young after the death of Hank Williams.
Nothing confusing there.
Nothing confusing there, folks. This is country music. So Hank is fired August 11, 1952 from the Grand Ole Opry, and he is known as the Hillbilly Shakespeare. And he still continues to write all of these songs. He will not stop writing these hit songs, you know, and these people are making money, as is he, from all of these different songs that are being generated. So not only is he, you know, trying to create these concerts where he's making about $12,000 to $13,000, $15,000 a night, Eric, the publishing of these songs is enormously successful. he owns them, and Fred Rose obviously takes chunks out of it, the publishing firm. But nevertheless, I mean, when he releases Move It On Over and Lovesick Blues and Hey Hey Good Lookin', and all of these songs become huge hits. I mean, I think he had if I can remember, 11 #1 hits on charts: Lovesick Blues, Long Gone Lonesome Blues, Why Don't You Love Me, Moaning the Blues, Cold Cold Heart, Hey Good Lookin', Jambalaya, I'll Never Get Out of This World Alive, Caligula, You're Cheating Hard, and Take These Chains From My Heart. I mean, this guy had 11 #1 hits in a tiny little framework of life. Keep in mind, he's dead at 29. All of this happens in a 2-year period. He records 89 songs. He records 89 songs in the first half of 1952. Literally the last year of his life. So, I mean, he's not sitting around shooting dope or getting drunk. However, he does in 1952, at the end of 1952, begin to develop heart problems. And because of the heart problems, he hooks up with a guy named Dr. C.W. Lemon. And you say, well, who is Dr. C.W. Lemon? Dr. C.W. Lemon is like the Dr. Brinkley that we talked about in an earlier episode. His real name is Toby Marshall, and he had just gotten out of the Oklahoma State Penitentiary. He got out of the Oklahoma State Penitentiary because he was a forger and a phony doctor who would write prescriptions for drugs. And there were the guys who did it back in the old days were the guys who became phony doctors. And in other words, he sent away for phony doctorates through the mail, this guy, Lemon. And Lemon, when you were a phony doctor like Lemon, you weren't acting as a doctor. You were what was called a croaker. And guys who were addicts would look for you. In other words, he's not treating people because he wants to be a doctor, like a phony doctor. I don't know if I can explain this properly, but there are doctors who are phony doctors who are really just drug dealers. And the people who are looking for drugs are not deceived by these doctors. They're looking for these phony doctors, if that makes any sense.
We still have that now, right?
Right, exactly. But this is what Lemon was, a.k.a. Toby Marshall. So he prescribes morphine, and the forgery is in the prescriptions. So a regular doctor is not going to prescribe morphine, chloral hydrate, and other substances that Hank Williams has prescribed. They come from Toby Marshall, right? And Toby Marshall writes these prescriptions for him, which, I mean, look, the guy's got a back brace, an incredibly bad back. And he starts giving him morphine, which, of course, going with alcohol, chloral hydrate, and he prescribes him amphetamines too, Eric.
What a good friend.
Again, that's what dealers do. I mean, right. I mean, dealers, friend or not a friend. I mean, this guy, Hank sought him out and Hank found him. And in 1952, September 23rd, was Hank's last recording, and he recorded a couple of songs. He's on death's door. I mean, there's a photo of Hank. I don't know if you have it.
There's
not
Toby.
that one.
This is Toby.
Oh, that's great. Oh, that's great. I've never seen that. That's fantastic.
That's him in court, and you're looking, I think, for him in jail.
There's Hank coming out of jail, I think.
Well, this one right here.
That's Hank in 52. That's at the end. Yeah, that's a bad shot of Hank. Wow.
And there was questions with this shot too that people were saying that he had Marfan's, or there was some claims about Marfan syndrome, something about where the joints are separating. I
right.
guess.
Well, he had the spine fused at Vanderbilt University, a regular surgery after the squirrel shooting incident. So I don't know how successful that spine fusion surgery was. To be honest with you, I don't know how that went, but he did leave very shortly after that. And, because he wanted to get on the road and play music, and he's showing up. He's showing not showing at gigs. He's showing up doing one song and leaving. He's showing up getting in fights with the audience. Maybe one night he'll play a perfect show. People will flip out. There was one guy I remember talking about, I think it was Rodney Crowell, talked about seeing him in Houston on the end of this tour when he was like 3 years old on his father's shoulders. And his father said, doesn't matter how bad he played. You saw Hank Williams' son. Don't ever forget it. And that was enough for Rodney Crowell to get into the music business, was seeing him at the age of 3 on his dad's shoulders. So, I mean, you can't explain how godlike Hank Williams was to America back then. I mean, I hate to say he's bigger than Elvis, but it's at that level. You know, I mean, obviously he ends his life way before Elvis. So Elvis's legacy is huge and bigger because his life was longer. But Elvis didn't write any of those songs. Hank Williams wrote his own songs. These are Hank's songs on Hank's life. You know, when he wrote You Win Again, it was a song about Audrey winning divorce again from him. These were personal, heartbreaking songs. And America knew that. America knew this was about Hank's life. That's why he was revered. He was revered because he was real. And, you know, in a lot of ways, and I don't want to denigrate Elvis at all, but in a lot of ways, Elvis was a circus act. You know what I mean? He got up, sang these rockabilly songs, and he was, you know, good looking, the opposite of Hank. He was sexy, the opposite of Hank, but he didn't have the gravitas that a Hank Williams has. I don't think anybody would ever suggest that. I mean, Hank was Bob Dylan. You know, if Elvis was, you know, Mick Jagger or something at his peak, I mean, there's a big difference between Mick Jagger and Bob Dylan. I mean, if that makes any sense as an analogy, and it's not exact, but you know, or someone, maybe Elvis is a Jim Morrison type, you know, where you know, just really sexy lead singer type. But the fact of the matter is, the nation felt Hank's pain. And in this recording session, the last one he ever had, in September 23rd, 1952, he records Your Cheating Heart and Take These Chains From My Heart. Those are his last 2 recordings, and he's trying. What is this one here? This is
his last photo.
Oh wow, yeah, there's a photo of him in bed with I think like a press release of Your Cheating Heart. There's a book laying next to him with the headline on it. The last single he releases, with actually Chet Atkins played on it as a guitar player in a studio session in Nashville. The last single was November 21st, 1952, and it was I'll Never Get Out of This World Alive. And Chet Atkins said to the band as they ended the recording, he goes, "You could bet on that, Hoss," you know, looking like he was going to die. I mean, this is the 21st of November, 1952, and he'll die, you know, obviously New Year's Day in 1953. So he's 29 there. But he's trying the tour that he's on, the last tour, I think he was trying to get from Montgomery to first Knoxville. When he gets to Knoxville, that'll be canceled because of the weather. But it's the end of a tour, and the last performance he gives in life is December 21st, 1952. And that's in Montgomery itself. And it's for a benefit concert, fittingly enough, for a radio announcer who has polio. Now, Hank had given a number of commercials, done a lot of stuff for the March of Dimes. I'm going to put some of these up after the show on Local, some of the rare commercials and PSAs that Hank did for the March of Dimes, the polio thing. He didn't have polio, but he had spina bifida, which didn't have the gravitas of polio, but he commiserated with people who had congenital born birth defects.
Rippling diseases, essentially.
Yes. So he's on the last end of this tour. I think the last spot when Rodney Crowell talked about Houston, the last actual spot on the tour was in Austin, Texas, at a club in Austin, the Skyline Club, which was December 19th. That was the last official concert on that tour. So he is now trying to do a New Year's show, and he on December 30th gets a shot of morphine, chloral hydrate. He's getting all these things to make this show, and he gets to Knoxville, and he's supposed to fly from Knoxville to Canton, Ohio. And when he gets to Knoxville, it's snowed in, and he can't fly. So what he does is he gets 2 more shots of morphine, and he gets this kid who's a family friend, the son of a family friend, Charlie Carr, who's about 17, 18 at the time. He's going to Auburn. The guy recently passed away. Charlie Carr had driven Hank before, and Hank had that huge Cadillac. I don't know if you have a picture of it, the baby blue convertible 2-door. Yeah, there it is. There's that boat. That's in the museum in Montgomery, by the way. If anybody wants to go see that, you can. In the back, you'll see the indentation of where Hank died. And he would get people to drive him in that Cadillac. He'd hire drivers. In fact, Charlie Carr, I think they gave him $300 or $400 in 1952 money to make that drive. It was a 500-mile drive. I mean, think about what these people are doing for a gig back then, Eric. You know what I mean? You had no tour bus, or people did have tour buses, I guess, miniature. It wasn't like the tour buses of today. But Hank had people drive him for $300 or $400 because the gigs were making a lot more. So this kid, Charlie Carr, they carried, this is weird. Before he got into that car for the final trip, the bellhops in the hotel in Knoxville carried him from his room by his shoulders and his feet, semi-conscious and puking into the back seat of the car. I mean, that's rock and roll. And he's laid out in the car, but he comes to. I mean, this is not unusual for Hank Williams the last couple of years of his life. So he comes to, and they're going to drive 500 miles. It's insane, through snowy roads, through the woods. And in the afternoon, they stopped at Chattanooga. They stopped in Chattanooga before they got to Knoxville. They had lunch in Chattanooga. And he goes in, and on the jukebox, he plays the Tony Bennett version of his song, which is kind of interesting as well. He puts money in the jukebox. And, somebody said to him in that restaurant, "How do you write these songs, Hank?" And he said famously, "I just hold on to the pen, and then God sends them through." I mean, what a great line. What a great line. I mean, Dylan kind of said that in 60 Minutes, like he had no idea. They're talking about being, the muse of creativity. I mean, Hank just put it on God and just said, "I just hold on to the pen." There's different versions.
Michelangelo almost.
Yeah, no, a lot of artists have said it differently. I mean, there's different ways to say the same thing, but how poetic of a way to say it for Hank, So they drive this 500-mile drive through the snow, and somewhere between Oak Hill, West Virginia, if the people in West Virginia might know where this is, and Canton, Ohio, that's where something happens in the back seat of the car. And
this is Charlie Carr.
Oh, yeah, look at that. That's great. That might be soon afterwards. Somewhere between Bristol, Tennessee, to be technical, in the middle of the night, in a snowy mountain road between Bristol, Tennessee, and Oak Hill, West Virginia.
Bristol, Virginia. By the way.
This is Bristol. This is Bristol, Tennessee.
No, Kingsport, Tennessee, and Bristol, Virginia. Bristol, Virginia is on one side of the border. So I
don't know about that, but this is Bristol, Tennessee. This is a separate place, I guess, and Oak Hill, West Virginia, because it's a long stretch. That they don't know when he died, is what I'm saying.
Right. Interesting. Okay.
Anyway, the mountain road is I'm talking about maybe a stretch of a couple of 100 miles, right? Mm-hmm. Because the kid, Charlie Carr, reaches back to put the blanket back onto Hank Williams to move the blanket up a little bit. He's laying back there, and his hand is cold and rigor mortis has set in. He's been dead for hours. That's kind of like, so there's nobody knows where he died, is what the point I'm trying to make. I don't know the exact town, but what I'm saying is a long stretch of road where that's what I meant, is nobody knows the exact spot that he died, because he was dead for hours when Charlie reaches back to pull the blanket on. His hand was frozen and it was already stiff, Eric. You know what I'm saying? So Charlie Carr kind of freaks out. He's 17, actually.
I'd freak out.
I would freak out. You're in the middle of the night with Hank Williams dead in the back seat of his own car. There's beer bottles back there, and some sort of notes that he was writing. He was always writing lyrics So there were lyrics on the back seat and empty beer bottles. I mean, how fitting of a time, for that to happen. So they go to the coroner, and the coroner happens to be a Russian, of all things. It's kind of odd, but he's a Russian immigrant, and he says he died of heart failure, which is not too much of rocket science. I mean, but one of the last things he said to Charlie Carr was, every time I close my eyes, I see Jesus coming down the road. He's coming after old Hank. And I mean, he knew he was going to die. I mean, but at 29, I mean, wow. It was like he was 59 years old. You know what I mean? The coroner said his heart was completely shot. But the weird thing about this story, if you want to jump a little bit ahead, I mean, they have the cemetery, the funeral is held in Montgomery, and something like 40,000 people, 35,000 people showed up. There's a photo. I don't know how many thousands of people are in the streets of Montgomery for this funeral. But it was just one of the craziest musical funerals of all time, because everybody performed at it. And when he was supposed to get to Canton, Ohio, which I think is now the headquarters for the Football Hall of Fame, Canton, Ohio. When he gets to Canton, Ohio, which he doesn't get to, his attempt to get to Canton, Ohio, the promoter of the show keeps going out on stage making jokes that Hank's on the way, right? And they're going, well, it's snowing. He probably got drunk, went off into a drift, blah, blah, blah. So he keeps coming out on stage. His final appearance on the stage, the promoter of the event, he comes out and says, Hank Williams is dead. And the audience starts laughing because he had made such crazy comical statements all night about where is Hank Williams. And he would say, he was stuck in a ditch somewhere. And, people were just used to him coming out that night saying he'll be here in a couple of minutes. So initially they laughed. And then the performers on the stage broke into I Saw the Light, acoustically, and started singing I Saw the Light. And one by one, the people in the audience begin to stand up and sing along with the performers, I Saw the Light, until everyone in the auditorium in Canton, Ohio was singing I Saw the Light spontaneously. I know, it's one of the heaviest things I've ever heard of in the history of music. And they all knew the words to I Saw the Light, and they just started singing it along. I mean, it's really just an amazing, amazing tribute to Hank Williams that it just gives me chills up and down my spine when I hear about this story, which it's kind of touched on a little bit at the very end of the. Remember, I was telling you about the George Hamilton movie when we were in Montgomery. I don't know how many people know this story, so I'll just tell it again for the people who don't know this. When Your Cheating Heart came out in 1964, I believe, with George Hamilton, it's a biopic of Hank Williams, and George Hamilton playing Hank Williams. There was a woman there, a young woman with her girlfriend, who saw the movie and said, I'm going to marry that man if it's the last thing I do. And that was Linda Bird Johnson, the daughter of LBJ. And Linda Bird Johnson begins dating George Hamilton, who she sees as Hank Williams in this movie. And he dresses her up and takes her to the Oscars and tries to pretty her up. And the odd thing is, LBJ takes a liking for George Hamilton. LBJ was a big Hank Williams fan, obviously, from Austin, Texas. And he wants George Hamilton to become his son-in-law. And George Hamilton doesn't really want to keep dating her, but LBJ won't let him stop dating his daughter, Linda Bird Johnson. And he can't really get out of the relationship. He told me this when I was researching an LBJ script that I was working on, a miniseries on LBJ. So George is telling me how, he had the Secret Service on him, and then protests begin to form outside the White House because George Hamilton is not going to Vietnam. And he gets invited to the ranch by LBJ, and LBJ meets him at the private plane landing with his Lincoln Continental convertible, with a drink in his hand and his drinking cup. and he gives him a rifle, and they go out deer hunting right from the plane. He just leaves his luggage right on the tarmac, and he takes George Hamilton out into the woods of his ranch outside of Austin, Texas, and he sees a group of deer, and they get down on their bellies, and he says to George Hamilton, he goes, "There's one, George, bag that one." So George on his belly fires one shot and kills this giant buck. And LBJ famously says to him, "You're some kind of a Daniel Boone, ain't you, boy?" And George was just cracking up. He's saying, "No, I'm just a good shot." George came from Memphis, Tennessee, and had been hunting his whole life. But nevertheless, the point of the matter is, George Hamilton played this part of Hank Williams, and Linda Bird Johnson thought she was going to marry him. That never came to being. But the reason I mention it is because you're asking me about Hank Williams hanging out with Elvis. He didn't, but the one who did was George Hamilton went on a double date with Elvis and Anne Margaret with Linda Bird Johnson. So that was as close to answer that question as I possibly could about the meeting. But getting back to I Saw the Light, the lyrics, the words of I Saw the Light, I wandered so aimless, life filed with sin, I wouldn't let my dear Savior in. Then Jesus came like a stranger in the night. Praise the Lord, I saw the light. I saw the light, I saw the light. No more darkness, no more night. Now I'm so happy, no sorrow in sight. Praise the Lord, I saw the light. Just like a blind man, I wandered along, worries and fears I claimed for my own. Then like the blind man that God gave back his sight, praise the Lord, I saw the light. I saw the light, I saw the light. No more darkness, no more night. Now I'm so happy, no sorrow in sight. Praise the Lord, I saw the light. I was a fool to wander and stray, for straight is the gate and narrow's the way. Now I have traded the wrong for the right. Praise the Lord, I saw the light. I saw the light, I saw the light. No more darkness, no more night. Now I'm so happy, no sorrow in sight. Praise the Lord, I saw the light. I mean, no song could be more fitting than the life of Hank Williams to the lyrics that he wrote to I Saw the Light. May have come from some other derivative sources. Some people say it came from some other spiritual song, but He Set Me Free, I think, may have been some inspiration for Hank, but clearly a Hank Williams original song that will live on longer than any of us because it's now infiltrated itself into the American church life and into Christian life and into spiritual life in the United States. And that is the reason I wanted to do this show about Hank Williams. That is what Hank Williams is. That's how big Hank Williams is to American life, that his songs have not only just, like rock and roll songs were considered to be sinful. Hank's songs were considered to be spiritual. Hank's songs went into the American church. Hank came from the gospel tradition of the church. And that's why he was able to just write these songs. Little Jimmy Dickens, who was on the balls of his ass, this tiny little singer, country singer, and Hank would write songs for these people who he felt sorry for. And he said to little Jimmy Dickens, he says, "Give me a piece of paper." And he grabbed a piece of paper, from Minnie Pearl, and he said, "All right, write this down." And he wrote down these lines, and right there, it became "Hey, good looking." And he said, "Record that. You can pay your mortgage on your house." And that was Hank. Yeah. That was Hank Williams. That was Hank Williams. And he would do that for his friends. He would write them in 5 seconds a hit song. And he didn't know how he did it. Nobody knew how he did it. This wasn't the Beach Boys. This wasn't the Byrds. This wasn't the Stones. Although, like I said, Honky Tonk Woman was a tribute to Hank Williams as a honky tonk man. But this guy was so gifted in terms of songwriting. He had no idea how he did it. He just felt that it came directly from God through the pen, and he just held on for dear life, to use his own words. And he is an American original. His birthday, 100 years, will be September 17th. I'm sure there's going to be some celebrations or some specials that are on TV. You can watch the Ken Burns segment on Hank Williams, which is really, really well done because so many people are involved in it. And I'm going to tell you another side story about Hank. And I think it was in 2000 and 2005 here in LA, a woman janitor of all things, a janitor who was female, who worked at Sony, was going through the dumpster, and in that dumpster, she found notebooks, and in those notebooks were lyrics of songs that Hank Williams never recorded, Eric. And
throwing them away. Good God.
Oh, no. It was in the dumpster here in Hollywood. This is God's honest truth. I didn't know this story. In 2005, she sells them, not for a lot of money, to the Honky Tonk Museum in Nashville. And so they could be put on display, by the museum that gives her a bunch of money. She's arrested by Sony. The press charges that she stole them from Sony, that she stole them. She goes to trial and she's acquitted. So, and the judge and jury acquits her and says she clearly found these in the dumpster, bro. And she's acquitted of these charges by Sony. Okay, so the museum gives them back to Sony. In 2008, Sony takes those lyrics, pieces and tidbits of lyrics and songs with no music. Hank couldn't read music. He couldn't write music. Mm-hmm. Everything was inspirational. He takes the lyrics, Sony does, and they give them to Bob Dylan. Mm. And they tell Bob to choose what he wants, write a song, and pass it on to the rest. And Bob Dylan does that, and he picks out a song, and then it becomes Levon Helm picks out a song. Lucinda Williams picks out a song. Sheryl Crow does a song. Jacob Dylan does a song. Holly Williams and Hank Jr. combine to do a song. Merle Haggard does a song. This is an album called The Notebooks of Hank Williams. If anybody wants to buy the album, you could listen to it on YouTube, certain songs. These are spectacular songs that people put together based on the lyrics of the notebooks of the unfinished songs of Hank Williams. In 2008, when Dylan gets them, he brings in these other people or him with Sony, brings in these other people to record this album of Hank Williams songs. If you want to hear it, there's other Hank Williams cover tribute albums, but this story is so fantastic about the female janitor that I just wanted to share that part of the story about how this album came to be of Hank's stuff in like 2008, 2009. So, because it's much more contemporary and people can relate to it.
And at least they gave it to the right people.
Yeah. They knew this was gold, and they gave it to Bob, and Bob's on there, and Haggard's on there, and it's just a spectacular album. If people want to hear the Levon Helm one, there's Jack White on there. If you want to hear Jack White doing it, also, I mean, there's a couple other people on there who are country on top of that. But wow.
Jack White. Wow.
Yeah, it's the weakest one on the album is Jack White, but the Haggard one, of course, is the best. We just listened to it last night. We were listening to each one, and I saved the Haggard one for last because I knew it was going to be the best. And Haggard's is the best on the album. I mean, these are songs that nobody knows, so it's not like I can even name them. The only recordings of these songs are on this album, The Notebooks of Hank Williams. So if you want to hear these rare songs brought to life by these great artists, as it's not really that they're covering them, they're actually creating them from the lyrics, Eric.
I think he would appreciate it. Actually.
Oh, dude, this would be wow. And Hank Jr. is uncredited. Holly Williams is on there. Holly Williams being the sister of the girl you indicated died in the car crash. Holly Williams, the daughter of Hank.
Yeah, this is the one who died, Catherine.
Yeah, that's his stepsister. But the Jet girl, Jet Williams, this is what I was telling you before about the girl he has the affair with, the dancer. That's Holly Williams. Yeah, she's still performing. She's in her mid-40s. She's really good. You'll see her in the Ken Burns documentary talking about her. Well, she's the daughter of Hank Williams Jr. Yeah, but Billie Jean, who was the girlfriend, never has a kid with him. But Jet Williams is born from Bobby Jet, and Bobby Jet gives birth 5 days after the death of Hank Williams to his daughter from Bobby Jet, the dancer, which is really a sad, sad story. And Bobby Jet, the daughter, Jet Williams, is adopted by Hank's mother, Lily Williams. And when Lily Williams dies, the Jet is taken over by the state, becomes a ward of the state. It's really a sad story, but she lived a pretty long life too, and performed also, Jet Williams. So
you've seen his grandson, right? Who does
resemble him. Well, Hank the Third, that's another story.
Hank 3, yeah.
Hank 3 was in LA. Everybody ran into Hank 3 out here, Eric. And he became a meth wildcat, but an incredibly talented speed freak performer. I hope he's clean now, but I mean, he comes from that lineage of drug addiction. But Hank the Third, who was out in LA for a number of years in the 90s, and everybody ran into him out here. Great performer. I mean, he's got the gift. If he can stay clean, he can have a huge career. But yeah, he's definitely got the Hank look and the Hank sound. He did some covers of his grandfather's material, and he sounds just like him, Eric. He really does. But he's more of a punk rock kind of a guy, you know.
Yeah, I heard he was doing. Somebody said he did like thrash country or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. But he hung out with Elliott Smith for a while and some other people out here. Mm-hmm. Makes sense. You want to see the Elliott Smith episode? I don't know if Hank the Third is in there, but Hank the Third is in some movies with Elliott Smith that I have. So they were here at the same time, so they're kind of contemporaries. But yeah, the band, the Drifting Cowboys, was the band that Hank played with. Had various members, but it was kind of like an all-star band, and it had some variations of it. But the Drifting Cowboys were his backup band, and they were the real McCoy.
Wow.
But yeah, I wonder what happened to. Let me just see some Jet Williams, if she's still alive. Yeah, she's still alive. He was born in 1953, January 6th. Like I said, 5 days after his death. Parents: Hank Williams, Bobby Jet. Hank Williams Jr. is her half brother. Hank Williams III, half brother. Holly Williams, half niece. So this is a cockeyed family tree. But and interestingly enough, the woman who marries Hank at the end, the 19-year-old, begins to bill herself as a singer-songwriter, and she is really good. Billie Jean Jones, who hangs out with Farron Young, is a great singer-songwriter. She begins to bill herself as Hank Williams' widow. Audrey Williams bills herself as Hank Williams' widow. So we have these two competing country music. No. We have these two competing country music women, both billing themselves as Hank Williams' widow. So Audrey ends up with the Hank Williams estate. So she's loaded for bear financially again, but she will go through all the money. She will end up broke. She will burn everything to the ground. She will go to jail. She will do a lot of things, Audrey. But one thing she does do is she gives the wife of Hank Williams, the second wife, Billie Jean Jones, $30,000 in cash, and contractually gets her to drop the name of Hank Williams' widow, so she can be Hank Williams' widow, which is pretty interesting.
Wow.
But yeah, there's some court stuff involved, but no, it's just the usual crap that goes back and forth, you know, with money and multiple widows and stuff like that. But I thought it was funny that they both built themselves.
This is Jet, by the way.
Oh my. Okay. Yeah, I guess she's still going. Mm-hmm. She published a book in 1998, Nothing as Sweet as My Baby, and this 2006 Tennessee Court of Appeals upheld a lower ruling stating Hank Williams' heirs, Hank Jr. and daughter Jet Williams, have sole rights to sell his old recordings for a Nashville radio station in the early 1950s. So there is some. Her nephew, Hank III, is an ardent critic of her, once noting in an obscenity-laced 2010 documentary that she was an atrocious performer and that she should have written a book instead. So there seems to be some bad blood among the survivors. Who's on the right there?
That's Hank III.
Oh, Hank III. Wow.
I just thought this was a great shot. Back when everybody was happy and young.
Yeah. Well, of course, Hank Jr. will famously come to national fame. Are you ready for some football, for Monday Night Football? I mean, one of the great rousing songs of all time. Many people will remember, Monday Night Football always opened with Hank Williams Jr., and that put him on the national stage. He will later fall off a cliff and break his entire face. And have to have facial reconstructive surgery. That's why he wears those goggles still. He was drunk and fell off a cliff onto his face. I forget where it was, but yeah.
Wow.
No, I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. These Williams live hard. They live hard, and they have a genetic predisposition towards alcoholism, and I think it's because of the Native American blood, whether it's Cree or one of them, with whatever tribe is in Alabama. I'm not sure. I forget which tribe it is, but that is in Hank Williams' DNA, and a lot of that alcoholism comes from that. But yeah, he's an American legend. It's a great American story. I wanted to get it out there because of the 100th anniversary that's coming out next week, and put it with our other musical episodes that we did, Eric, like the Elliott Smith one and some of the other musical ones we've already. Maybe we could have like a musical list of American icons, because we're going to get to Dylan, and Dylan is the level a little bit bigger than Hank, obviously, but it's that kind of stuff. These icons.
Strange Loves we did.
Oh, the Strange Loves. Well, that was like a fluky thing. Yeah,
sure,
that was
sure.
like And I'm talking about American icons. Of Hank Williams and Bob and some of the others that we're going to cover,
And we're doing Colonel Tom Parker, but not Elvis, right?
I don't know the answer to either one of those, but
no, well, you mentioned doing Colonel.
I did.
Yeah,
all right, then we'll do it. Then we'll definitely do it at some point. If I said it, we'll definitely do it. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, when I was in Montgomery, I was just driving around, going to the different Hank-related places, and one of the ones I went to was Oakwood Cemetery. And Oakwood Cemetery, it's just there was nobody there. It was kind of spooky, Eric. I just went on my own, and I thought, well, where do you park? You don't park. You drive right to his grave. So I said, okay, let's drive up the hill. Let's take a shot. I don't know. I've never been to Oakwood Cemetery. So I turned the wheel, and we're driving up, and there's a couple of signs up there. And lo and behold, I come upon this situation that Eric's going to show you right now.
Right. You want that film? Hold on.
Yeah, give me just a little video that I shot for these people. There's some more video I'll put up on Locals, but I think this was very God-inspired. It was just so beautiful up there that night. And here's a little bit. There's Hank's memorial. There's a little thing right there. If you could leave that. Yeah. If you pan up, and then I don't know if I pan to the left, but on the left is a similar one for Audrey. She's buried right next to him. The same exact obelisk than Hank and her together. There's this incredible engravings there. I don't know if that's a footstone or what would you call that, but the entire I don't know what that's called, but it's just up on top of this incredibly beautiful hill at Oakwood Cemetery in Montgomery, like almost close to downtown. Just absolutely gorgeous. That's where I ended up literally yesterday, I think, or the day before yesterday. I think it was on Sunday. Yeah, there's the two of them together, side by side.
Which is ironic because they didn't exactly get along together.
But they did. I mean, she, You're Cheating Hard is inspired by Audrey. You Win Again, inspired by Audrey. All of these songs, according to his friends, are inspired by Audrey, and she's part of his life. And, for better or for worse, they fought, but they loved each other. He loved her madly. And, that's downtown. That's the statue that I think the city put up for Hank. It's right by the riverfront there. In the back of it, there's some words from Hank Williams Jr. thanking the people who paid for the statue. Yeah, I wanted that shot because the sculptor who did this really nails Hank's knee bending, and this is kind of like an Elvis kind of shimmy thing that Hank used to do, where he would knock his knees together when he was really cooking. And it was almost like he was dancing in place. And they kind of capture that. The sculptor, there's a bronze life-size sculpture of Hank in downtown Montgomery, across from the Renaissance Hotel, by the way, right in front of the riverfront. You have to walk through a tunnel, look kind of sketchy, but that bending of the knee is kind of a symbol of Hank Williams that was noted by many writers at the time, that he would dance in place while he was strumming and playing this type of rockish blues music that he created. That's also part of the base of the mausoleum, Hank's hat, with a bunch of the songs written there that he wrote. You'll see a number of the actual songs.
Amazing.
Is there another photo of somebody there that anybody would show up?
Somebody there? I don't know. Let me see. There's some vagrant showed up.
Oh, okay. So this is a shot of me at the cemetery. Obviously a selfie. People take crazy selfies, but this is a keeper for me. I don't know. I don't take that many selfies because I don't really care, but this one I care about.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's a fascinating story. Kind of very sad as a whole.
It's sad, but it's inspiring, and it's 100 years, and it's about America, and these are America's untold stories. That's why I wanted to cover Hank. I don't know if there's a Hank of Australia that somebody wants to cover, but this is really part of Hank. Hank is so inbred in American culture that it weaves in African Americans who helped him with Tetot, and also Native Americans who are in his lineage, and him, and white Southerners. And it is such an American story, and it is 100 years, September 17th, 1923. So, just play Whippoorwill and, You Cheating Heart and Jambalaya and some of the great stuff that Hank did, and move it on over, and just blast the shit out of that music, folks, because they ain't making music like that anymore.
Well, especially not now.
Right.
But on a uplifting note, we do have some super chats. People are checking it out. James Holbrook, Hank's son, Vociferous was my guy.
No, Bocephus.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people just grew up on Hank Jr., which was fine. I mean, Hank Jr. is great.
Yep. Randy Johnson. I live by the dung pit, which is Shreveport, Louisiana. Outside the miserable anti-culture that's prevalent there, there's a little bit of good history. Hank Williams and Louisiana Hayride are a couple of bits.
That's right. That's right. I've been to Shreveport. I love Shreveport, by the way. So I gave a shout out to Louisiana Hayride because Shreveport is a big part of the story.
Let's see. Etienne de Gaulle. I grew up listening to Hank on my parents' 78 records.
Wow. Yeah, he is on 78 records. And I don't have any of them, but there are 78s of Hank, and they're quite rare.
Oh, I believe it, yeah. Glad you guys are back. Well, thank you, John S.
It's not like we're not back. We went and did a show in another city. You didn't go because you're a fat bastard.
In England.
Yeah, in England. You couldn't get it together to fly over from England. For the love of Christ. Get off your fat ass in England. Come over and see the show. You're back.
It's been another great show, gents. Quite amazing that Hank's music has made it into such a diverse corners of the U.S. as here in Minnesota. And yet,
Well, that guy's got a guy up in Hibbing, Minnesota, named Bob Dylan, Robert Zimmerman. So I don't know about a diverse corner. There's no Dylan without Hank, bro.
Yeah,
there's no Dylan without Hank.
And that's Dylan, what he meant.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Misinterpreted.
He fell off the cliff when he was younger. He had hits in the 80s, All My Rowdy Friends, etc. Then became famous due to Monday Night Football.
Right.
I remember growing up. Hey, my parents had a AM radio, and they played K-Cub all day, all evening, every day.
What is that, a rock channel, a country channel or something?
Country channel in Tucson. No way. My dad hated rock. So I grew up hating country. It's my obligation.
Listen, like I said, there's only one kind of music, and that's American music. And
sure.
I've said that for years. It's just American music. I don't care. Charlie Parker would go into a bar with his band and play Hank Williams on the jukebox, and they would say, "What are you listening to that country crap for?" Charlie Parker famously said, "It's for the stories, brother, for the stories." That's from Charlie Parker.
Well, I always liked the ballads. Those I liked. Innis Fad, why take the selfie in front of Audrey instead of Hank?
Why take the selfie? I didn't do that.
Yeah, well, you did. You took a selfie of yourself in front of Audrey's.
No, it's not.
Okay.
Is that true? Let me take a look at that.
Yes, it's true.
Let me take a look at the photo. No, I think there's two of them.
Here you go.
I think there's two of them. Hold on.
This is the only one I know.
Oh, well, I took two. That's fine. Hold on.
Okay.
No, I took them both. Right. I'm looking on my phone.
Okay. Well.
Right. Hold on. There's the Hank one coming in. Hold on.
Yeah, go through.
No, Hunley. I'm sending you the Hank one. I did them both. Go on.
Yeah. Everybody, you shamed Mark.
No. I have both. I'm sending you the other one. That's all.
I'm working on it.
Jesus Christ. People are kind of demanding. Like, why do you so misogynistically hate Audrey? I mean, she could have been a great singer. She took. What does that say?
That one's Hank.
All right. There you go. You happy now?
All right.
Is any more Spectrum people out there I have to deal with?
All right. Well, you have to deal with some locals tips. Guilty as Jumbo sent in a tip saying, "Hey, good looking," with a picture of Hank Williams from downtown.
Okay.
Guilty as Jumbo was actually at the event.
Oh, right.
Also known as Fake Mark Lopez.
Boy, these people have crazy handles.
Mark Lopez bought the ticket, and he was like, "No, I'm not Mark." And so I said, "You're Fake Mark Lopez," but his name's Alex.
Right. I just like the guy Larry who drove from Oklahoma to come to the event. He just went out for cigarettes and kept going.
Yeah,
that's my favorite guy. Although I like Big Texas Tom too, and the
we
judge.
Got to see Dustin.
Yeah, Dustin was brilliant. I mean, Dustin's apparently a political operative in Ohio or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was the federal judge I loved. The woman retired. She was great from the Bush era.
Mm-hmm.
She knew from Houston, I think.
Yep. Twins 123. Howdy y'all. Ale House 20 said, "I know of Hank Williams' demise in Back of Limo from Patti Smith's version of Pale Blue Eyes."
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Church Part said, "Americana." And James Vespa said, "Hello."
Hello.
And Big Bad Teddy from Local said, "Good show. Nice suit, Mr. Groubert."
It's my Hank Williams suit.
It definitely has a country vibe.
Yeah. Well, as Waylon said, he sure Hank done it this way.
Fine. Well, fantastic. Now, good news. We are back on Friday for Freeform Friday. So our schedule is resuming. We got thrown off a little bit because of traveling. It's hard to do a show from the plane, as Mark was trying to explain to me.
Yeah, it's hard to do the show from the plane.
Can't get the permission. And on that note, we will see everybody for Freeform Friday.
Okay.
On Friday.
Okay.
See you then.